Hello everybody and welcome to this video where I'm going to take a detailed look at how to analyse language and structure and form in the Shakespeare section of your English Literature GCSE exams. This is probably the most common question I'm getting at the moment. What is the difference between structure and form? How do I build them into my answers? So if you find this video useful, please do make sure that you're subscribed to the channel, that you give the video a thumbs up. It took me a long time to prepare this video, and I'd be more than happy to show you the same thing for modern drama and prose and the same thing for poetry, but make sure that you are giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. So first, let's start by having a look at a typical question. Now, this is actually a question that I have in my English literature guide at mrbruff.com if you want the ebook for £3.99, or amazon.co.uk if you want the print edition for £6.99. So make sure that you check the ebook or the print book out. But basically, this is an example from Romeo and Juliet. Same thing applies if you're doing Macbeth, whatever Shakespeare play. You're given an extract we see here, and it says, read the following extract from Act 1, Scene 5, and then answer the following question. At this point in the play, Romeo and Juliet have just met. And the extract is the Act 1, Scene 5, the bit in the film by the fish tank, where Romeo and Juliet are essentially kind of flirting with each other and then kiss. And the question is, starting with this conversation, explore how Shakespeare presents attitudes towards love in Romeo and Juliet. Write about what Romeo says to Juliet in this conversation and how Shakespeare presents love in the play as a whole. Now, if you've not familiarised yourself with this extract, it's worth having a look through it. Romeo says, if I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle fine is this. My lips to blushing pilgrims ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. Juliet replies, good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this, for saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Romeo, have not saints lips and holy palmers too? Juliet, I, pilgrims' lips, they must use, I, pilgrim, lips they must use in prayer. Romeo, oh then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do, they pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair. Juliet, saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. Romeo, then move not, while my prayer's effect I take. Typical question, a short extract, you're told where the extract comes from, it's contextualized, then you're asked to analyze the theme of that extract and also that theme in the wider play. So here is the question again. Now the key thing about the wording of the question is how Shakespeare presents something. It's not, you know, who is in love or what does the play tell us about love. It's how does Shakespeare present. Language is probably the easiest bit. Language is something we're all pretty familiar with. Sorry for the typo here. But language is what you've been analysing in language paper 1, question 2, paper 2, question 3. It's basically a writer's use of words or phrases or language features and devices for effect. In other words, are there words that Shakespeare has deliberately chosen where other words would have been fine? And for language in this extract, we could talk about the use of religious language, holy shrine, pilgrim, devotion. And then we've got to link that back to the question, what does it show us about love? Well, perhaps the use of religious language shows us how love is pure and holy. Then we've got the use of physical language, the use of kiss and lips and touch. And perhaps we could argue that between these two types of language, it shows us that love is all-encompassing, that it is pure and holy, but also physical and sensual as well. So that's the language analysis. That's the bit that most people find easy. How do we need to jump into structure analysis? Well, with Shakespeare, where you're given an extract, it's really important to think about where that extract comes from in terms of the overall structure of the text. Structure, just like in paper 1, question 3, is to do with what happens where and why that is important. How are things ordered and why is that important? And one of the ways we analyse structure, and this is all in the revision guide, is we look at Freytag's pyramid. Freytag was the German novelist in the 1800s who looked at structure, building on the work of Aristotle from 300 BC in his Poetics. And he said, you know what, all plays and novels, and we can apply this today to films as well, follow this structure. They begin with an exposition where we're introduced to the main characters and setting. Then there's the inciting incident, a moment, something that happens that gets everything kicking off to build up towards the climax. And the climax being the big moment of tension where the main character comes face to face with a conflict, they have a choice to make, and winding down to the denouement, the sort of fallout, the ending, happy or sad. In the case of Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth and all tragedies, of course, we know the denouement is going to be death. So the first thing we can think about is how can we apply this to our text? How can we apply this to Romeo and Juliet? Well, the exposition, Act 1, Scene 1, is where we're introduced to the Montagues and Capulets and learn that they are enemy friends. The inciting incident is where Romeo and Juliet meet at the party and fall in love. The rising action, Romeo and Juliet get married. The climax, Tybalt kills Mercutio, Romeo kills Tybalt, Romeo is banished. And it all winds down to the denouement where pretty much everybody dies. Romeo kills Paris, Romeo kills himself, Juliet kills herself, the families are united. Now, knowing the structure of a text is so important, and I really recommend that for the Shakespeare play you're studying, if it's Romeo and Juliet or not, and for the 19th century novel that you're studying, that you apply Freytag's pyramid to that text, because certainly on AQA, the Shakespeare play and the 19th century novel are extract-based questions. And if you know where the extract comes from, because you know the whole text structure, it gives you something to write about structure. So here's what you do. If you know the whole text structure as we've got it on the screen, you ask yourself, where does this extract come from in this structure? The extract that we've got is basically the inciting incident of the play. It is the moment that starts everything building and rolling towards the tragic ending of the play. It's at this moment when Romeo and Juliet meet that everything kind of starts to go terribly wrong because it's the enemy families. Now here's what you do. When you've worked out where the extract comes from in terms of the structural approach from Freytag, then you ask yourself, okay, because it's placed there structurally, what does that tell us about the topic of the question? In this case, love. Because this is the inciting incident of the play where Romeo and Juliet first meet, what does that tell us about love? And there are a couple of things we could say. You could say this shows us the difference between true love and lust, because if you remember in Act 1, Scene 1, Romeo is sad. Why is he sad? Because this woman Rosaline won't get with him. So now he's happy and he's met Juliet in Act 1, Scene 5, and you could say that this is deliberately introduced at this point structurally to show us that what he had with Rosaline wasn't true love, what he has with Juliet is true love. Okay? But the more interesting thing for me is, I actually think there's a negative analysis of this, which is that, well, if the meeting of Romeo and Juliet is the inciting incident, then it's showing us how love can cause trouble. It's showing us the negative and difficult side of love, because it's the inciting incident in what we know is a tragedy, and it is what we know will lead to conflict and problems. So that structure analysis, you would say, because this is the inciting incident in the play, what it tells us about love is that it can cause trouble, because ultimately it is this moment that leads up to the climax and the eventual death of all of the titular characters, the characters in the title. The other thing you can do, just the same with paper 1 question 3 for structure, is you can look at the structure within the extract. So for example, there's a continual repetition of lips from Romeo. So does that show his demanding nature for the physical side of the relationship? Also, I think it's interesting how there's this repetition or mirroring from Juliet of Romeo's words. So if we look at the way that Romeo says about hands, and then Juliet says you do wrong your hand too much. Romeo says about lips, then Juliet says lips that must be used in prayer. Romeo says about saints, Juliet says of saints do not move. And there's an interesting sense in this play, and it's certainly something I believe in. I've written a revision guide on Romeo and Juliet. Check it out, it's really useful. But it's certainly something that I believe in, that Romeo is manipulating Juliet here. She is, if you remember, such a young girl, and she is being influenced by him. And that is represented by the fact that she is copying his words. It's almost as if she cannot form her own opinion. And that's not, something that is a good thing. We know Juliet is 13. Her father says she hath not seen the change of 14 years. We don't know, I think, exactly the age of Romeo, do we? But We get the sense that he's a bit more experienced. We get the sense that he's been in love before and he's known women before. So the fact that she repeats him seems to suggest that he is dominant in the relationship and sort of manipulating her, and she is using his words because she doesn't know how to handle this situation. And all of that is structure analysis. So it's really impressive analysis when you start looking at structure. What about form? So many of you asking the difference between structure and form. Well, structure is what happens where, the placement of things, the order they come in. We can look at it through Freytag, we can look at it through repetition, we can look at it through cyclical structure, all those kinds of things. Form is simply the type of text we're reading or studying. Is it prose, drama, or poetry? And you can see on the screen those forms can be broken into subforms. This comes from the Mr. Bruff's Guide to A-Level English Literature. But, within the form of poetry, for example, we have lots of other forms, don't we? We have the sonnets, we have dramatic monologues, all those kind of things. But basically, when it comes to writing about form, this is the important thing. Let's just talk about Shakespeare for a second. The Shakespeare play you're studying is a play, and the exam board are continually frustrated that students write about plays as if they're the same as other texts. They write about a play in exactly the same way that they write about a novel, in exactly the same way that they write about a poem. So what you need to do to analyse form is to make it clear in your answer that you're aware that this is a play, and as such, it has features that are exclusive to plays, such as stage directions, such as soliloquies, that kind of thing. So what I would suggest is to hit form in your analysis when we're talking about plays, make sure that you analyse stage directions. Now there are no stage directions in this extract, so I would be thinking, okay, when I refer to the wider text, I want to make sure that I bring in a stage direction. The other thing that's interesting, and this is mind-blowing, is that when you place Romeo and Juliet's words together here, they actually form a Shakespearean sonnet. 14 lines, iambic pentameter, A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G rhyme scheme. And they are about love. That's when you put Romeo and Juliet's words together, they follow the form of a perfect Shakespearean sonnet. So what is that saying? They together, united, create perfect love. So that's language, structure, and form as it applies to Shakespeare. If you want me to explain the same thing for your modern drama or prose and for your poetry, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel and that you give the video a thumbs up.